Welcome back to The Deep Dive. Today, we are taking a look at something fundamental, something we all have, a daily schedule, but we're going to treat it with the intellectual rigor and precision it really deserves.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
We're not just here to talk about productivity tips. We are doing a deep analysis on the architecture of an intentional existence.
And that's a really necessary shift in perspective, I think. Most people, they see their daily routines as just a consequence of everything happening around them.
Right, work, family, appointments, all the external stuff.
Exactly. But the sources we've been digging into, they reveal that true high performance and well-being, they come from viewing the day as a meticulously engineered blueprint.
A blueprint. I like that.
Yeah. I mean, all the grand successes we aim for, they're built every single day through the cumulative effect of these small intentional steps, what our sources call the micro habits.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. We've been immersed in a really fascinating stack of material here. Everything from detailed personal itineraries from, the high-pressure corporate world all the way to the deeply structured life of advanced academia.
And the variability is huge, right? They look so different on the surface.
Immense, but the underlying methodology, it's almost identical.
And that's our mission for you today.
Yes.
We want to extract that exact methodology. Our goal is to give you a sophisticated, structured understanding of how to build a regimen that doesn't just, squeeze more tasks into your day.
Right. It's not about just being busier.
No, not at all. It's about instilling a profound sense of what the sources call equilibrium and agency over your own life. And crucially, we're also going to give you the advanced lexicon, the terminology, to define and analyze and even troubleshoot this architecture intelligently.
So we're moving beyond just saying, I follow a schedule. We're analyzing a life that is fundamentally delineated by these consistent, repeatable behavioral patterns.
Patterns that you stick to from the moment you regain consciousness until, you succumb to slumber. It's an intentional sequence, not just a chaotic timeline of events.
Okay, so there's a core principle at play here.
Yes. The sources really drive this home. The outcome of all this intentional structure. It's not solely about productivity, that's just the byproduct.
I think that's what most people miss. They think structure equals more work done.
Exactly. But the ultimate goal, the very definition of equilibrium, is the successful carving out of explicit moments for true regeneration, for self-care.
And without the structure.
Without the structure, those vital regenerative moments are the very first things that the day's demands will they'll steal them from you.
That's a key distinction then. Structure actually creates capacity. It's not about restriction.
Precisely. If you don't define the boundary for your own self-care, the inherent exigencies of the day will always consume that time.
Okay, exigencies. That's one of those words. Let's define that.
It just means the pressing matters, the urgent needs that pop up, the fires you have to put out.
Right. So let's jump right into the foundation of this blueprint phase 1, the morning ritual. This is where it all begins, right? The initiation of wakefulness and setting the day's entire trajectory.
Absolutely. The morning sets the gravitational pull for the whole 24-hour cycle.
Yeah.
And we immediately see a contrast in the sources about this transition into wakefulness.
Okay.
We looked at one schedule, highly focused on academic pursuits, which, typically sets a wake-up time of 0700 hours. The other, driven by corporate demands, starts a bit earlier, often at 06.30.
That 30 minutes doesn't sound like much, but I have a feeling it's incredibly revealing.
It's everything. That half hour is determined by external constraints.
Yeah.
The corporate schedule, it often mandates an early start to deal with different time zones, stakeholder calls, or just a complex commute. It demands that head start.
Whereas the academic has a bit more flexibility.
A little more, yeah. It allows their morning structure to be optimized purely for their own internal cognitive launch, rather than having to sync up with the outside world immediately.
So regardless of that start time, SUA 6.30 or 7.00, the quality of the awakening process itself seems paramount.
It is. Both regimens prioritize what's termed a gentle start. One source details this practice of taking 5 to 10 minutes for stretching and deep breathing before you even get out of bed.
And they have a specific name for this, don't they?
They do. It's meticulously labeled as somatic awakening.
Somatic awakening. I mean, that elevates it, doesn't it? It's more than just having a good stretch. So what's the architectural purpose here? What does that actually mean?
Well, it's the intentional engagement of the soma, the body, to score, signal to your nervous system that the transition from a sedentary sleep state is happening, but it's happening gently, not abruptly.
Not with a blaring alarm clock and a jolt.
Exactly. And physiologically, it serves two functions. First, it physically loosens your musculature, gets the circulation going after hours of being still.
Yeah.
But second, and this is more critical, the deep controlled breathing that goes with it.
Right.
It helps shift your autonomic nervous system away from that fight or flight state, especially if you were woken by a harsh alarm, and more toward the parasympathetic rest and digest state. It mitigates that initial rush of cortisol.
So you're consciously choosing serenity over stress from the very first moment of your day.
You're designing a smooth ramp up,
Yeah.
not a sharp, jolting start. And this systematic physical transition, it then leads directly into the next step, the immediate physiological jumpstart.
Okay, a jump start. And this is where the sources highlight a truly universal and, it seems, a non-negotiable micro-habit.
It is the immediate paramount habit, consuming a full glass of water. Now, everyone knows hydration is good. We hear it all the time.
Sure, drink more water.
But our sources use the term to jumpstart, metaphorically. They're stressing the aggressive, immediate initiation of the metabolism. After 6, maybe 8 hours without fluid, your body is in a dehydrated, metabolically sluggish state. This action just immediately floods the system.
But why the rush? I mean, why immediately? Why not wait 10, 15 minutes, make a coffee first?
The urgency is directly related to systemic detoxification and energy generation. The sources note that this immediate hydration helps the lymphatic system clear out all the metabolic waste products from overnight before the body really engages in activity.
I see.
And it also signals to your digestive tract that the fasting state is officially over. It's like the simplest engine ignition you could perform, making sure your blood viscosity is optimal for the peak cognitive function you're going to need in the next steps.
So the internal engine is running. What's next?
Next comes the external presentation. The formal cleansing routine, referred to as ablutions.
Ablutions. That sounds so
Yeah.
formal, almost ritualistic.
And that's the point. It's this beautiful, slightly literary term for washing oneself, oral hygiene, facial cleansing. By using this term, the act is elevated from just a biological necessity to a formal, intentional ritual of preparation.
You're setting a higher standard for the day ahead.
It's a conscious signal. You are performing a ceremonial demarcation between the passive state of sleep and the active state of performance. The language you use builds that trajectory of intentionality.
I'm starting to see how this all connects. So we've awakened the body with somatic awakening
Energize the metabolism with the jumpstart.
and formally prepared the outer self with ablutions. Now what?
Now we move to preparing the body and mind for the day's inevitable exigencies. And that, of course, begins with sustenance, with fuel.
In the fueling phase, this shows a really crucial strategic split, right? Based on what you're anticipating for the day.
A huge split. The academic schedule, which might involve, say, focused solitary study right away, often favors modest, unpretentious meals. A simple bowl of oatmeal, maybe some artisanal toast. The goal is easy digestion and the sustained, steady glucose release.
No huge energy spikes and crashes.
Exactly. Whereas the corporate routine, which anticipates high mental processing needs, maybe some external social energy drain, often leans toward more nutrient-dense options. We're talking eggs on whole grain toast, a protein-rich smoothie.
Okay, so this is fuel designed for immediate high output energy.
It's a buffer. The meal choice is a direct, strategic reflection of the machine's required output for the coming hours. If you know you have a complex decision-making meeting at 9 a.m., you just cannot afford the metabolic lag of poor fueling.
Right. So after the sustenance comes what seems like a critical step, systematic mental organization.
Yes. Post-breakfast, both regimens dedicate a brief period, maybe 15 to 20 minutes, to reviewing the agenda and, most importantly, to triaging communications.
Triaging. Okay, so that's another one of those key terms. It's borrowed from emergency medicine, isn't it?
It is. It means assigning degrees of urgency and importance to all your incoming demands. Emails, messages, voicemails. You're not just passively checking them. You are systematically prioritizing.
And the advanced lexicon here, it implies a system that goes way beyond just skimming your inbox.
Oh, absolutely. The corporate regimens, for example, often use variations of the Eisenhower matrix or the 40s do, defer, delegate, delete as part of their triage protocol.
So what does that look like in practice?
Well, the corporate worker isn't just reading every email. They're quickly tagging it. Is this an immediate action item? Category red may be related to a key stakeholder or a pressing deadline. Is it deferred but important? Category yellow, requiring deep focus later on? Or is it, category green, just administrative stuff or an FYI?
And that active prioritization prevents the day's exigencies, those fires, from overwhelming you right at the start.
Exactly. It puts you in control. And the academic worker triages differently, of course.
Right. How so?
For the academic, triaging often applies not just to communications, but to intellectual tasks. Which research paper requires immediate analytical synthesis before the seminar? Which administrative task can be put off until that low-energy slot later in the day?
So the exigencies are different, internal deadlines versus external demands, but the system of prioritization is structurally the same.
It's identical. And if you successfully triage, you approach those high-pressure zones not with surprise or chaos, but with a predetermined plan of attack.
And the psychological benefit of this whole systematic start, I mean, that seems to be the core reason for doing it all.
It is. Our sources consistently link this rigorous organization to a distinct psychological benefit: the ability to feel organized and profoundly serene before immersing yourself in the day's actual demands.
That word serene really stands out. It's not a word you usually associate with a busy morning routine. It's kind of the anti-burnout mechanism.
Precisely. When you address every necessary preparation, step body, fuel, schedule, priorities, before the external world starts to impose itself on you, you move from a reactive state, constantly catching up,
To an autonomous one.
exactly, an autonomous state. And that sense of serenity is the tangible feeling of agency, of having built a mental buffer that allows you to manage the day rather than being managed by it. It's the difference between executing a controlled process and just fighting wildfires all morning.
That sets the stage perfectly for the critical work block of the day. The morning has launched us. Now we need to sustain and maximize that output. So let's move into phase 2, the afternoon itinerary. This is all about capitalizing on the cognitive peak.
Yes, the afternoon is generally identified as this sort of golden window. For most people, especially if they've done that structured morning we just described, this is when mental focus and complex processing power are at their absolute highest.
So roughly what time are we talking about here?
Generally between, say, 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. And this window, it must be strategically defended and utilized for deep work.
And the nature of that deep work, it's going to differ based on the regimen, I assume.
Oh, it does. The academic uses this time for complex solitary study, which requires that kind of non-linear, discovery-based thinking, synthesizing data, writing high-level analysis.
Right.
The corporate worker, on the other hand, they use this peak for more linear, high-stakes decision-making, tackling complex project deliverables, or chairing critical strategy seminars. Both require maximum processing power, but the application is tailored to their specific output.
But maximizing that peak requires a methodical approach that actually seems a bit counterintuitive to how we normally think about hard work.
It does. The sources stress the absolute necessity to intersperse brief intervals throughout these prolonged work blocks.
Intersperse, so to scatter or place breaks among the work sessions.
Exactly. And we aren't talking about logging off for an hour. We mean 5-minute intervals for stretching, stepping away from the workstation, performing what they call ambulating, which is just a fancy word for walking around, and all to preserve your mental acuity.
So why is this scattering of rest so vital, especially when you're at your peak focus? I mean, why risk breaking that flow?
Because the brain isn't a static resource. It fatigues. Specifically the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for that high-level executive function. Continuous, intense focus leads very quickly to diminishing returns.
To cognitive saturation.
Exactly. The break is a micro-reset. When you intersperse a break, you're giving the brain a moment to clear its immediate working memory, allowing the neural pathways to refresh. The little burst of physical movement also helps with oxygen flow.
So the interruption is actually what maintains the quality of focus.
Yes, it prevents that steep drop-off in productivity that almost always happens after about 90 minutes of continuous effort.
I think we've all been there. That 4-hour session where the last hour feels like you're wading through treacle.
Right, and this intermittent break strategy is key to defeating that diminishing return curve. But that methodological approach has to be supported by the right nutritional strategy.
Ah, yes. Specifically one designed to avoid the infamous energy slump.
The governing principle is crystal clear. Avoid heavy, difficult to digest, carbohydrate-laden meals at midday.
Because heavy meals have a specific and very unwelcome effect. They induce lethargy.
And lethargy is that state of weariness, that total lack of energy. Heavy foods induce or cause this state through a really complex metabolic mechanism. When you eat a huge caloric load, especially simple carbs, your body releases a surge of insulin to manage the blood sugar spike.
Okay.
And at the same time, your digestive system demands a massive influx of blood flow to break down all that food.
So the body is diverting resources away from the brain.
That's it, exactly. Your brain is essentially starved of the resources it needs because the body is prioritizing digestion. And on top of that, the insulin spike helps certain amino acids get into your muscles, which leaves tryptophan, a precursor to serotonin and melatonin, to cross the blood-brain barrier more easily.
Melatonin, the sleep hormone.
The sleep hormone. So the ultimate result is that feeling of post-meal drowsiness. You are literally inducing the biochemical precursors of sleep.
So if you're trying to capitalize on your cognitive peak, that heavy pasta dish or that huge sandwich is actively directly working against your own goal.
Precisely. And this metabolic drop-off is so predictable that, as you mentioned, it has a formal academic term, the postprandial dip.
The food coma?
The food coma. And light meal choices, a salad with lean protein, quinoa bowls, a turkey sandwich, they're designed to circumvent this dip. They provide enough energy for your body without compromising the acute mental function you need to sustain your cognitive peak. You want nutritional satisfaction, not digestive stress.
So once the light meal is eaten and the postprandial dip is successfully avoided, the afternoon routine then requires strategic task execution.
Yes, you regroup post-lunch to strategize for the second half of the day. The focus immediately shifts back to the most substantial, high-priority projects, those category red tasks you identified in the morning triage.
And this is where the concept of capitalizing on your remaining energy reserves comes in.
Taking the chance to gain maximum advantage from your remaining resources.
Exactly. In this framework, it means deploying your highest remaining cognitive resources efficiently to finalize those pivotal tasks before the day naturally starts to wane.
You have to think of it as a resource allocation problem. You have a finite amount of acute focus every day. If you save the most difficult synthesis or the highest stakes negotiation for 4 p.m., you are attacking it with a mentally depleted system.
You're setting yourself up to fail.
You really are. By capitalizing on that window immediately post-lunch, you ensure that maximum energy meets maximum complexity.
And this all feeds back into that idea of structure for agency. If you just let your afternoon drift into reactive tasks, you lose the opportunity to control your highest value output. This is real organizational intelligence in action.
It is. And it allows you to enter the transition period, the wind down, knowing that the primary difficult work of the day has been successfully executed, not just deferred until tomorrow.
That brings us beautifully to the final major segment of the day. And this is perhaps the most vital for long-term psychological sustainability. Phase 3, the evening rituals, decompression and restorative repose.
After hours of sustained cognitive demand and managing all those exigencies, the evening has to be designated for decompression. This is where you consciously, intentionally shift gears and alleviate the mental and emotional pressure you've accumulated.
The term decompression is such a powerful metaphor. Why did the sources choose that specific word?
Well, it's borrowed from deep sea diving, isn't it? If a diver ascends too quickly, the pressure buildup causes the bends.
Right.
Similarly, if you transition too quickly from high-stress work mode straight into trying to sleep, the built-up mental pressure, the cognitive noise, the residual stress hormones, it will prevent restorative rest. Decompression is that necessary, controlled, gradual ascent from intensity.
You're ensuring the mind and body can smoothly transition into a low-energy mode.
Exactly.
So what specific mechanisms are suggested for starting this process?
The sources outline a few, mostly physical and auditory relaxation methods. Engaging in a leisurely stroll, maybe some light calisthenics, or auditory stimulation through music. The key is that these are activities entirely separate from the cognitive demands of the workday.
So for the corporate worker, this might be something totally different than for the academic.
Yeah. For the corporate person, it might be complete mental silence, listening to ambient music to quiet the inner dialogue of the day's conflicts. For the academic, who might actually find intellectual thought relaxing, it could be listening to a simple, non-demanding podcast that keeps the mind lightly active without requiring any high-stakes analysis.
It's about creating a defined boundary. You leave the stress on the other side of that walk or on the other side of the first song on the playlist.
Precisely. Physically, that light activity helps metabolize residual stress hormones like cortisol. And psychologically, it creates the necessary closure, signaling to your brain that the performance chapter of the day is definitively closed.
So after that shift, we get to the evening meal. The sources suggest dining around 1900 hours, or 7 p.m., and they emphasize meals that are simple, easy to digest, but also highly satiating.
Yeah, we need to distinguish that term. Satiating is more sophisticated than just filling. A heavy meal might fill you up, but it leaves you lethargic and uncomfortable. A satiating meal fully satisfies your appetite and your body's nutritional needs without burdening the digestive process.
And what are the strategic food choices here?
We're aiming for ease of processing and nutrient timing that supports overnight recovery. So meals like grilled salmon, a stir fry with lean protein, rice bowls, they offer a balance of protein for cellular repair and, critically, a small amount of quality carbohydrates.
So carbs aren't the enemy in the evening?
Not at all. That low, steady intake of complex carbs actually helps the sleep process by modulating brain chemistry in a supportive way, which is totally unlike that big noontime sugar spike we want to avoid.
And often the preparation itself needs to be expedient.
Oh, indeed. Expedient cooking prioritizes speed, practicality, and minimal cognitive load over complexity. I mean, the evening is for unwinding. Launching into some hour-long, complex culinary project completely defeats the purpose of decompression.
Right. The goal is fuel efficiency and mental ease.
Yes, to maintain that flow toward rest. And once that simple, satiating meal is done, our sources highlight what seems like a minor routine act, the meticulous attention to hygiene post-dinner. But they define this cleansing as a critical part of the psychological reset.
That's a deep insight.
It really is. The act of cleansing, washing your face, taking a shower, doing the rest of your evening hygiene, it becomes a powerful mental mechanism. You are physically and symbolically clearing the cognitive load of the day.
You're literally washing away the day's grime and the day's exigencies.
Yes. The physical sensation of being clean, of being purified, it serves as this undeniable sensory signal to your brain that the shift into relaxation is complete. The workday is sealed off.
And that definitive endpoint allows you to enter the final stage, the wind-down protocol and sleep consistency.
Right. You've established the necessary mental and physical boundaries. And the most crucial boundary here is the strict no screens policy, especially for high stimulation media, in the final hour before bed.
We hear this all the time, but why is it so vital?
Well, the blue light spectrum from our digital devices, it actively suppresses melatonin release, which is the key hormone for sleep induction. But it's also about the content. The stimulating hyperarousal, content news alerts, complex social media interactions, it keeps the brain in a state of high vigilance.
So what do these highly structured regimens substitute for that screen time?
They opt for intentional low-stimulation alternatives.
Yeah.
Reading literature, ideally physical books, or consuming herbal infusions.
And with the reading, they suggest something specific, don't they?
Yes, light, non-demanding fiction, rather than complex nonfiction analysis that might trigger the kind of deep cognitive processing they spent all day cultivating. And the herbal infusions, chamomile or valerian root, they contain compounds that actively support the relaxation response without any kind of pharmacological intervention. It's gentle analog input.
I have to ask a question here because it seems a little counterintuitive. If the goal is absolute restorative sleep, why read literature at all? Isn't that still a complex mental effort right before bed?
That's a great question, and it speaks to the nuance here. While the brain is still engaged, reading provides a single-focused, predictable input flow. It's an immersion that crowds out the intrusive, stress-related thoughts about tomorrow's exigencies or today's mistakes.
So silence can actually be counterproductive.
It can. Silence often allows the mind to just cycle back to stress. Reading provides a controlled distraction, a gentle mental exercise that paradoxically helps you shift away from the self-generated anxiety that is the primary barrier to falling asleep for so many people.
That makes perfect sense. It's controlled cognitive activity to prevent chaotic cognitive activity. And all of this preparation, it leads to the ultimate keystone of vigor, adhering to a consistent sleep schedule.
Consistency is absolutely non-negotiable. Aiming for bedtimes between 10 and 10:03 p.m. 5. That regularity regulates the body's natural circadian rhythm. When you go to sleep and wake up at roughly the same time every day, your body optimizes the timing of all its hormone releases, melatonin, cortisol, growth hormones.
And that is what allows us to achieve the final outcome of the day's entire architecture.
Which is restorative sleep.
And how do the sources define that? What is it physiologically?
It's the pinnacle. Restorative sleep is sleep that fully restores your health, your strength, and your well-being. Physiologically, it's defined by spending the necessary amount of time in the deep, slow-wave sleep phases and the REM, or rapid eye movement phases. During that deep, slow-wave sleep, the body prioritizes cellular repair. physical restoration, growth hormone release. During REM, memory consolidation and emotional processing happen. If the entire day's routine, from somatic awakening all the way to decompression, is executed properly, you achieve the necessary ratio of these phases.
And that ensures you feel fundamentally more vigorous and prepared for the next day.
Exactly. You're ready to complete the loop of the regimen architecture and begin the intentional existence all over again.
It's fascinating when you frame it like that. The structure of the day is entirely engineered to guarantee the quality of those final 7 or 8 hours. The whole 16 hours of waking preparation are, in a way, just a prerequisite for the quality of your sleep.
That's the core synthesis. The architecture is not just about maximizing the hours you're awake. It is equally, if not more, about optimizing the hours you are asleep. By analyzing the entire arc, from the intentional awakening rituals to the restorative repose, we see that structure is the keystone that locks in organization and autonomy.
And we've established that whether you're, navigating the high-stakes corporate world, you're engaged in rigorous academic pursuits, or you're simply seeking general betterment, curating a regimen that's suited to your specific needs is the primary pathway to achieving both, to achieving what we've termed equilibrium and agency.
And we have to reiterate that the true value of this deep dive was never about just ticking arbitrary productivity boxes. It was about defining and executing those crucial moments to regenerate and practice self-care.
The somatic awakening, the ablutions as a ritual.
The decompression at the end of the day. Sustained high performance is simply impossible without that intentional balance.
And we've seen today how this incredibly specific, sophisticated terminology, words like exigencies, ablutions, postprandial dips, somatic awakening, it clarifies and elevates what might otherwise just seem like mundane, automatic actions.
By applying this precise lexicon, you bring intellectual clarity and systematic rigor to your own physical and psychological states.
The language itself becomes a tool for control.
It does. It gives you a framework for analysis. When something goes wrong, if you suffer an acute postprandial dip, you don't just feel sluggish. You can diagnose the failure in your nutritional strategy. If your sleep isn't restorative, you can audit your wind-down protocol.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you, the listener. We've demonstrated how applying this specialized language to the routine of the day enhances organization and systematic control over your time and energy. Now, challenge yourself. Where else in your life are things, abstract or messy?
Think about areas that feel chaotic. Maybe it's managing complex family relationships, or grappling with a demanding financial portfolio, or even just trying to start a new, difficult, creative hobby. These areas often lack defined boundaries and precise nomenclature.
So if you consciously applied this sophisticated architectural lexicon, if you identified the key exigencies of your budget or defined the decompression period you need after a difficult family discussion,
or even labeled that initial effort to start a new creative habit as your necessary somatic awakening, how might that intentional intellectual clarity bring a similar organization and systematic control to those abstract areas?
The power lies in naming the components, doesn't it?
It does. By naming a chaotic action precisely, you gain conceptual control over it, just as we gain control over the sequence of our day. So take the architectural blueprint we discussed today and challenge yourself to build a sophisticated lexicon for another abstract area of your life. It might just be the clarity you need to achieve total agency.
That's a deep dive that should leave you with a lot to build on until next time. Thank you for joining us as we unpack the architecture of intentional existence.
Go forth. Prioritize your somatic awakening. Capitalize on your cognitive peak. And please, remember the imperative of equilibrium. We look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Welcome back to the deep dive. If you, like us, have ever, spent years trying to build a new behavior.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether it's mastering a complex skill or just maintaining a consistent fitness regime or finally tackling that creative project, the pain point, it's never about figuring out what to do.
No, never. The books and the apps, they've got that covered. They give you the perfect schedule mapped out to the minute.
Exactly. The real agony, the real struggle is in the execution.
It's that chasm between intention and action, isn't it? We spent all this energy designing this ideal scenario, this perfect day, only to watch it just completely collapse the moment real life shows up.
Yes. The moment there's any chaos, a delayed flight, a kid gets sick, a sudden crisis at work.
And suddenly that theoretical perfection of the routine is, well, it's irrelevant. It's useless because it can't survive contact with reality.
That is precisely our mission today. We are going to move beyond the surface level tips The usual drink more water advice, and dive deep into the advanced cognitive architecture that really governs behavioral mastery. How do we make these behaviors endure? And crucially, how do we handle disruption without, throwing the baby out with the bathwater?
We're exploring the psychological lexicon, really. The language that underpins resilience and consistency. I think you should think of this as the architectural blueprint for an enduring, flexible routine.
The blueprint, I like that.
We want you, the listener, to walk away with a sophisticated toolkit, something you can use to analyze why your past routines failed, and, more importantly, how to build systems that work with your human nature, not against it.
Okay, so our deep dive today will be structured into 3 core psychological areas, and each one sort of builds on the last. First, we'll tackle stickiness. How do we hack our own brains to make consistency the path of least resistance? We'll get into the concept of automaticity.
Then we'll move into fluidity. This is the essential skill of adapting to disruption without letting the whole structure just fall apart.
And finally, we'll look at sustainability. This is about embracing the long game, the cumulative gains that are absolutely necessary for true mastery.
We're dissecting the how so you can stop asking why you keep failing.
Okay, so let's unpack this idea of stickiness. It really gets to the fundamental question, doesn't it? Why do some routines solidify? They become part of your identity. You do them without even thinking.
Right, like brushing your teeth.
Exactly. While others they dissipate within a week, even when you are fully motivated, intellectually committed to making it work.
The answer? In almost every psychological study, it really boils down to energy expenditure. More specifically to one word, friction.
Friction, okay.
If a new habit requires excessive mental effort just to get started, it is inherently unsustainable. Our brains are these incredibly efficient machines, They are hardwired to conserve precious energy and cognitive resources.
So if the new thing feels like a heavy lift every single time?
Every single time. Then the old, easier habit, the established path of least resistance, it's always going to win. And the new behavior gets abandoned quickly.
That idea of friction is so powerful because it kind of runs counter to what we all assume. We think it's about discipline or grit, right? But you're suggesting that the real master of habits uses preparation so they don't need grit for that first step.
That is exactly the distinction. Grit should be saved for complex problem solving, not for putting on your gym shoes.
Right.
We only have a limited reservoir of willpower. Some researchers call it cognitive capacity, and we should be conserving that resource for the moments when genuine effort or, emotional regulation is truly required.
Which leads us directly to the first key technique then.
It does, reducing the barrier to entry.
Okay, walk me through that step by step, because I think a lot of us miss the subtlety here. It's not just about making the task itself easier.
No, it's about making the initiation of the task easier. That's the crucial part.
The starting.
Precisely. The practical application is this. Your goal is to effectively hack your own path of least resistance. And you do that by eliminating the need for decision-making at the critical moment.
So you're taking the choice out of it.
You're removing the micro-decisions. If I want to inculcate a habit, that is, to instill it by such persistent repetition that it becomes permanent, I have to remove those tiny choices.
Okay, give me an example.
Let's take a complex goal, like, say, learning to code after a long day at work.
A heavy lift, for sure.
A very heavy lift. Now, if your process is 1, decide to code, 2, walk to the spare room, 3, open your laptop, 4, realize the software needs an update, and 5, spend 5 minutes just searching for the tutorial you saved last week.
You've already lost. I feel exhausted just hearing that.
You have absolutely lost. The cognitive load is just too high.
I see the connection now. So it's about using preparation to insulate ourselves from that future decision fatigue.
Correct. You need to front load the effort. Before you go to bed, the coding program should already be open, the tutorial video. Paused on the first screen, the laptop should be physically placed on your kitchen table, right next to where your first cup of coffee will be.
So you're leveraging that subconscious desire for ease. You've made the good choice the easy choice.
You've removed every tiny point of friction.
And all of this preparation, this is the scaffolding for the ultimate prize, which is moving a behavior from being this active, effortful choice to a state of automaticity.
Automaticity is the psychological holy grail of habit formation. It really is.
So what is it exactly?
Well, when an action reaches automaticity, it's performed almost reflexively. There's no conscious effort, no internal debate. You don't have an internal monologue about whether to put on your seatbelt or whether to brush your teeth.
Just do it.
You simply execute the behavior.
And when actions become automatic, this is where it gets really interesting for me. They require significantly less willpower. You mentioned willpower as a finite resource, which is a concept sometimes referred to as ego depletion in psychology, right?
That's the one. The idea that every act of self-control sort of saps this limited resource.
And whether it's truly depleted or just mentally draining, the effect feels the same. Your capacity for making hard decisions just diminishes as the day goes on.
Exactly. So by moving key beneficial behaviors onto autopilot, you free up those precious cognitive resources, that mental effort, for managing truly complex tasks, for engaging in deep work, or for navigating some unforeseen contingency that pops up later in the day.
It's a core efficiency mechanism for the brain.
It means you are not spending decision energy on things that should already be on rails.
So we've established the architectural side of it, reducing friction to conserve that cognitive load. But that only explains how we start the habit. What about the mechanism that makes us want to repeat it?
That brings us to the second, equally critical component for repetition, the essential reward mechanism. Human behavior is driven by consequence, specifically the anticipation of a positive consequence. If the immediate aftermath of a task is, for lack of a better term, purely drudgery.
So if it just sucks, basically.
Right. If you finish a really tough task and there is absolutely no payoff, mental or physical, your brain will resist repeating it fiercely.
So it's not enough to make it easy to start. It also has to feel worthwhile, and that feeling needs to be immediate.
Immediate. Even if the primary goal is way off in the future.
That's the key, isn't it?
Precisely. There has to be some sense of intrinsic gratification or an immediate, though maybe small, external reward to reinforce that neural pathway. And this immediacy is absolutely critical, especially in the early stages of habit formation. The brain needs that little hit of dopamine or just satisfaction to tag the behavior as worth repeating.
Okay, so give me an example of both, intrinsic versus external.
Sure. Let's say you're writing a difficult proposal for work. The intrinsic gratification might be that feeling of competence you get, or the deep satisfaction of crafting one perfect sentence, or solving a really thorny logical problem within the document. It comes from the task itself.
And an external reward.
An external reward would be something you pair with it. Maybe you listen to your favorite album, but only during the final cleanup phase of the proposal. Or you allow yourself 10 minutes to scroll social media, but only after you've hit your word count.
That distinction between intrinsic and extrinsic rewards is fascinating. I know it has some pretty significant implications for long-term behavior, doesn't it?
It does. We have to be very, very cautious with extrinsic rewards.
Why is that?
Well, while they can be great for initiating a habit, a lot of studies show that external rewards can actually undermine intrinsic motivation.
So they can backfire.
They can. It's a phenomenon known as the over-justification effect.
Okay, break that down.
If a person genuinely enjoys a task, that's the intrinsic gratification. But then they start getting paid for it or given constant prizes for it, the extrinsic reward, the brain actually reframes the activity. It stops being, I do this because I enjoy it, and it becomes, I do this because I get paid or rewarded.
And what happens if the reward goes away?
If that external reward is removed, the original intrinsic motivation is often lost with it. It's gone.
Wow, that is a critical nuance. So it means if you naturally love running, for example, you shouldn't promise yourself a new gadget after every single run, or you might accidentally destroy the joy you already found in the movement itself.
Exactly. The best habits are self-reinforcing.
Because the reward is baked into the activity.
Precisely. Intrinsic motivation builds far more sustainable habits because the source of the reward is the activity itself, which can't be taken away by outside circumstances. It's self-reinforcing and much less prone to collapse.
Okay, let's solidify this part of the deep dive. Let's anchor these mechanics to the formal psychological lexicon. This is the advanced architecture we want you, the listener, to really grasp.
Sounds good. Let's start with cognitive load. We define this as the total amount of mental effort being used in your working memory. But it's important to distinguish between two types.
Okay.
There's intrinsic load, which is the difficulty that's just inherent in the task itself. If you're learning astrophysics, that's going to have a high intrinsic load. We can't change that.
Right. The subject is just hard.
But then there's extraneous load. This is the difficulty that's due to poor design or friction.
So when you talked about the software updates and trying to find the right tutorial, those are examples of extraneous load. It's unnecessary friction that just spikes the total cognitive burden.
Precisely. By reducing that friction through preparation, what we're doing is surgically reducing the extraneous load required to initiate the habit. We're ensuring the limited capacity of our working memory is focused solely on the beneficial action, not on all the setup.
Okay, what's the next term?
The second term is inculcate. It implies a sense of permanence. To inculcate means to instill an attitude, an idea, or a habit through persistent instruction or repetition. We aren't just looking for temporary compliance here. We're aiming for a deep neural embedding where the habit feels almost inescapable.
Like an unconscious commitment.
Exactly. And that only happens when the repetition is consistent and the mental effort to start is minimal.
And finally, that brings us back to intrinsic gratification.
Yes. As we explored, this is satisfaction that comes from within you. Finding the task inherently meaningful or satisfying because of the challenge, or just the feeling of competence. When you're designing a new routine, you should always be looking for ways to maximize this feeling, maybe by focusing on small moments of flow or mastery during the habit itself.
Okay, so to give you, the listener, some actionable high-level tools to reduce that extraneous load, we should probably introduce 2 proven techniques that are built on this whole architecture.
Yes, let's talk about implementation intention and habit stacking.
Implementation intention is brilliant. It just tackles that initiation friction head on.
It really does. It's the formal way of saying, plan the when and where in advance. It takes the form of a simple if-then statement.
So like, if X happens, then I will do Y.
Exactly. If I get home from work, then I will immediately change into my running clothes. If I finish my dinner, then I will open my book on the kitchen table. This forces the decision into your prefrontal cortex ahead of time, ensuring that when the moment arrives, the decision has already been made.
Which reduces the cognitive load to near zero.
It does. And habit stacking is the genius of anchoring a new behavior to one you already have.
Leveraging automaticity you already possess.
That's it. You take an established, sticky habit like making coffee, brushing your teeth, eating lunch,
Yeah.
and you use it as the trigger for the new habit. The sequence is critical. After I reset existing habit, I will new habit.
So the established neural pathway of the old habit sort of pulls the new fragile habit along with it.
Instantly increasing its stickiness without requiring any extra willpower.
What really stands out to me here is that true habit mastery seems to be less about forcing yourself to do something you hate and much more about cleverly engineering your environment and the mental payoff so that the best choice just feels effortless, anchored, and immediately rewarding.
That's the whole game.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the goal isn't to try harder, it's to design smarter. And designing smart systems brings us perfectly to section 2, because no matter how sticky or low friction we make our routines, life is.
Well, life is not a laboratory.
It will always intervene.
Always. A client crisis hits, a critical piece of equipment fails, you get called away on an unexpected trip. What happens then? This is where the enemy of consistency rears its ugly head, the all-or-nothing fallacy.
This is perhaps the single greatest source of habit failure, especially for high-achieving people.
Why them specifically?
Because they often have a perfectionist streak. This fallacy is a mistaken belief. It's a cognitive error based on a totally unsound argument that if you can't perform a task perfectly at the exact scheduled time or to the ideal standard, then the whole day is a write-off.
The whole routine, the whole day, yes. The failure to meet the optimal goal leads to this immediate total surrender.
I can relate to this so well, and I know our listeners can too. If a major unforeseen contingency, like, say, a crucial server goes down at 9 in the morning.
Right. And it disrupts your planned deep work block.
Exactly. Then that critical voice in my head just jumps in and says, well, the morning is ruined. I might as well spend the rest of the day in reactive, low-level tasks and just start fresh tomorrow. Perfectly.
That rigidity is, you're right, it's a very brittle way of living. And it is the ultimate enemy of long-term consistency.
So what's the alternative?
The core skill we need to cultivate is not perfection. It is fluidity. If you're aiming for perfection, you are literally guaranteed to fail repeatedly. But if you're aiming for adaptability, you're guaranteed to succeed in at least maintaining momentum.
I love the analogy you bring up here because it visualizes resilience so clearly. You contrast the fragile glass vase, which shatters under pressure because it's so rigid.
Right. With the flexible bamboo stalk, which bends dramatically in the wind, the bamboo doesn't break. It moves with the wind, and then it snaps right back.
We need routines that are built with the flexibility of bamboo.
And this flexibility is paramount when that unforeseen contingency arises, that future event or circumstance that is possible but you just can't predict it with any certainty.
Yeah.
The objective has to shift instantly from perfect execution to the ability to recalibrate rather than just collapse.
So the goal is to have a tested, deliberate plan for what to do immediately after the disruption happens. But how do we structure that plan? What does that look like in practice?
In practice, it means recognizing that the absolute worst thing you can do when disruption strikes is nothing.
So doing something, anything, is better than zero.
Infinitely better. The required operational response is to execute the strategy of modular routines. This is the practical solution that gets you out of the all-or-nothing trap.
Okay, let's talk about modularity in detail. How do we build different tiers into a routine so they can scale down under pressure?
A modular routine simply means that every habit has a scalable minimum viable action, or an MVA. You have 3 tiers: the ideal, the standard, and the MVA.
Okay, that makes sense.
Let's use the example of mastering a new language.
Perfect.
The ideal might be, say, 60 minutes of immersive study. It includes vocabulary, grammar exercises, conversation practice, the whole 9 yards. The standard might be a more realistic 30 minutes of mixed practice on a normal day.
And then the MVA comes in when things go wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When you're traveling and dealing with jet lag, or when that crisis meeting runs 3 hours over, you default to the MVA.
So what would the MVA look like in that scenario for learning a language?
The minimum viable action might be pulling out your phone and spending just 5 minutes reviewing flashcards while you're waiting for the elevator. Or loading a specific short-form podcast in that language while you brew some tea. It is an action so small that it is psychologically impossible to fail.
And what's the effect of that tiny action?
You have preserved the continuity of the habit.
Right. The crucial analysis here is that this strategy preserves the continuity, it maintains the momentum. And maintaining that momentum is far more critical to long-term habit strength than sticking to a rigid timestamp or a specific duration.
Yes. The physical outcome of that 5 minutes is less important than the psychological win of not breaking the chain.
It's about identity.
That small, imperfect action sends this powerful, sophisticated signal to your brain. It says, this behavior is non-negotiable, even in the face of chaos.
Yeah.
We find a way to maintain continuity. You're prioritizing the identity. I am a person who studies this language every day over the output. I finished 60 minutes of study.
And the psychological benefits of that small win must be enormous, especially when it comes to managing all that negative self-talk.
Oh, absolutely.
By improvising a solution, by choosing to do the 5-minute flashcard review, the routine effectively mitigates the guilt that would otherwise spiral after skipping the habit entirely.
Guilt and shame are massive, corrosive habit killers. They really are. They lead to further avoidance and this sense of learned helplessness. By taking a small, positive, modified action, you minimize those negative feelings because you can objectively say, I didn't meet my ideal, but I did not fail entirely.
And most importantly, you maintain your sense of agency.
Absolutely critical. When you embrace fluidity, you remain the pilot of your day. You're adapting to circumstance rather than feeling like a passive passenger just being swept away by it.
Whereas the rigid person feels acted upon.
Yes, they feel acted upon by external forces when they miss their goal. And that feeling of helplessness just encourages them to give up. The fluid person chooses the adaptation, and by doing so, they maintain control and ownership over their day.
Okay, let's delve deeper into the vocabulary of adaptability, as this is really the mindset required for resilience.
We have to start again with fallacy. As we discussed, it's a mistaken belief, one based on a completely unsound argument. The all-or-nothing fallacy is so dangerous because it provides this convenient internal justification for quitting.
It's a cognitive shortcut to surrender.
That's a perfect way to put it. Recognizing it as a fundamental flaw in your logic, rather than a factual statement about your day, is the necessary first step toward correcting it.
It's the mental flaw that convinces you that zero is the only acceptable alternative to perfect.
Exactly. Next is recalibrate. To recalibrate means to adjust your plan or your strategy in response to new information or changes. When that unforeseen contingency hits, we need to create a cognitive gap, a little stop and think step before we react emotionally.
So the question changes.
The question isn't, should I do this or not? It becomes, given that I now only have 10 minutes and a migraine, what is the most effective 10-minute action I can take right now to maintain the thread?
It's an intentional strategic adjustment.
Not a surrender.
And that skill of recalibration is essential because life is defined by contingency. A contingency is a future event that's possible but can't be predicted with certainty. We spend vast amounts of time trying to prevent contingencies, but real mastery is accepting they are inevitable and designing a routine that can absorb the shock. If your routine assumes perfect conditions, it's fundamentally designed to fail.
It is. And that leads to our final word here, mitigate. To mitigate means to make something bad less severe, serious, or painful. The power of the modular routine is its ability to mitigate the emotional fallout of disruption.
So you might fail to meet your ideal goal,
But you succeed in preventing the psychological pain and the self-criticism that comes with abandoning the habit entirely. You turn what could have been a zero-sum loss into a small, meaningful win.
the ultimate insight here, then, is that when you build modularity into your habits, you're not just building flexibility for your schedule.
No, you're building compassion and forgiveness into your own self-system. This psychological safety net allows you to recover instantly, knowing that imperfection is the standard, not the exception.
And the speed of recovery is what defines the master. This brings us beautifully to our final section, the long game. We've established how to make habits stick through automaticity and how to bend without breaking through modularity, but now we have to zoom out. There's a common adage that applies here, and it really guides this entire section. We often overestimate what we can accomplish in a single day.
But we profoundly, profoundly underestimate what we can achieve in a year or 5 years.
This is the critical concept of cumulative gains.
It's often called the compound interest of self-improvement. The small, seemingly insignificant actions, that 5-minute modular effort, the low-friction initiation, when you repeat them consistently, they accumulate over time into massive transformative results. The gains stack up not linearly, but exponentially.
And here's where the temptation lies, isn't it? We are often so fixated on immediate dramatic results. The quick weight loss, the immediate publication deal, overnight fluency in a language.
We want it now.
We want it now, and because of that, we neglect the sustainability of our efforts.
And the consequence of that fixation is almost always burnout. Burnout, in the context of habit formation, is simply the psychological and physical result of setting an effort level of pace that is inherently unsustainable.
It's the inevitable result of trying to sprint a marathon.
That's it. If you plan your efforts for a month, you will almost certainly fail within a year. You have to plan for the minimum pace that you can maintain under duress for decades.
This brings us to a truth that a lot of self-improvement seekers find pretty counterintuitive, which is that true mastery is not always exciting. In fact, it's often profoundly mundane.
The path to mastery is paved with repetition, not with constant adrenaline boost. It doesn't matter if you're a professional musician practicing scales, a writer working on sentence structure, or a physicist reviewing core theorems. The core differentiator for success is not necessarily innate talent.
It's what then?
It's the ability to endure the boredom of consistency without constantly seeking novelty.
I think this is a huge hurdle in our modern culture, which constantly fetishizes excitement and instant gratification. If something isn't thrilling, we assume it's not valuable.
Exactly.
But you're arguing that the people who win the long game are the ones who can just show up day after day for the boring part, the routine part.
Because the boring part is the reliable part. Excitement is fleeting, you can't count on it. Consistency is a structure you can rely on. And furthermore, we need to introduce the concept of hedonic adaptation here.
That's a powerful psychological concept. For the listener, what is hedonic adaptation and how does it relate to all this?
Hedonic adaptation is the process by which the emotional impact of a stimulus, whether it's positive or negative, diminishes over time.
So you get used to it.
You get used to it. The joy of the new car or the new promotion fades as it becomes your new normal. And the same thing happens with habits. That initial burst of satisfaction you get from starting a new routine or achieving a small win, it fades quickly. You no longer get that dopamine hit from the simple act of just showing up.
So if mastery is monotonous and the initial gratification is guaranteed to fade, how do we counteract that adaptation to ensure sustainability? What's the trick?
The trick is to build in strategic small variations. You embrace the mundane core, but you vary the surface layer to keep the brain engaged.
So you don't change the habit, you change the flavor of it.
That's a great way to put it. If you run the exact same route every single day, the novelty disappears instantly. But if you vary the route, or vary the music you listen to, or maybe adjust the intensity every third day, you preserve a degree of novelty while maintaining the core consistency. You're managing the pace and the method, not abandoning the habit itself.
This shifts our mental framing of a routine entirely. We have to move away from seeing routines as this restrictive list of tasks that steal our freedom. Instead, they must be reframed as a framework for sustainable living and growth.
And this is where the metaphor of scaffolding becomes incredibly useful.
Yeah.
Routines should not be viewed as constraints,
Why not?
because constraints feel restrictive. They make us resent the habit, which reduces that intrinsic gratification we talked about.
Yeah.
Instead, habits are the scaffolding, the temporary supportive framework that supports the construction of our higher ambitions and our personal growth.
When you look at scaffolding on a building site, you get it. You understand that it's a temporary utilitarian structure, but without it, the workers can't safely reach the higher levels to build the actual finished product, the building itself.
Exactly. Your daily habits, the 15-minute modular workout, the consistent writing time, the low-friction preparation, they are not the goal in themselves. They are the essential supportive structure. They are the means to an end.
And viewing them as supportive tools rather than burdens, that has to radically change the emotional relationship we have with our routines.
It does. The scaffolding enables you to achieve your highest, riskiest ambitions because you know the foundation underneath you is stable.
And because the goal building changes and life changes, the scaffolding has to be adjustable, right?
It has to be.
This just reinforces the idea that building and maintaining a routine is fundamentally an iterative process. It is not some fixed monument you build on day one. It's a living system that requires constant experimentation, occasional failure, and perpetual adjustment.
The biggest mistake is believing you can find the perfect system and then just stick to it forever. Real masters understand their routine as a constant work in progress, always being tested against the reality of their current life phase.
So if you move, if your job changes, if your family dynamic shifts,
You have to treat your habit system like a piece of equipment that needs methodological recalibration. You have to adjust the scaffolding.
the critical final piece of advice in this journey then has to be patience. Be patient with yourself as you implement these changes.
Yes.
You are not building a bookshelf, you're designing a complex psychological system. If you had to recalibrate a complex piece of laboratory equipment, you wouldn't yell at it for not being perfect immediately. You'd methodically adjust it based on data and feedback. Treat your own habit system the same way.
Let's solidify the long-term consistency vocabulary just to give you, the listener, the precise language for this endurance. First, cumulative. This refers to increasing or being increased in quantity, degree, or force by successive additions. We use it to explain why these small, consistent habits have such a large cumulative effect. This concept reframes that small effort, the modular 5-minute win, from feeling insignificant to feeling absolutely essential.
It provides the mathematical proof that the daily small action is what matters most over the long haul.
Next, mundane. Lacking interest or excitement, dull. We noted that true success requires recognizing and, frankly, embracing the mundane nature of consistent practice. If the only time you enjoy your pursuit is when you hit a personal best or you get external praise, you are psychologically designing yourself to fail.
Whereas if you can appreciate the process, the consistent, reliable, boring nature of the practice itself.
You can endure forever.
Okay, third.
Third, scaffolding. Metaphorically, this is the structural framework that supports our goals. By framing habits this way, we stop seeing them as obstacles that restrict our freedom, and we start seeing them as essential tools that enable our greater ambitions. The temporary nature of the scaffolding also reminds us that the habit serves the larger project, not the other way around.
Then finally.
And finally, sustainability. This is the ability to be maintained at a certain rate or level. The entire pursuit of sticky fluid habits is dedicated to ensuring sustainability. This is the ultimate benchmark. If your routine guarantees burnout in 6 months, it is inherently unsustainable no matter how productive those 6 months are.
Right.
Long-term progress demands a pace and a method that can be maintained for years, not weeks.
The shift from that short-term, intense performance anxiety to a focus on long-term sustainability is, well, it's perhaps the most important realization for anyone trying to move from aspiration to real achievement. #outro. So let's synthesize the architecture we've explored in this deep dive. We started with stickiness, recognizing that true consistency requires engineering our environment to lower that extraneous cognitive load and maximize intrinsic gratification.
Right, making the right choice the path of least resistance using things like implementation intention.
Then we mastered fluidity, learning that rigidity is a brittle way to live. The goal is to avoid the all-or-nothing fallacy by building modular routines.
That allow you to recalibrate immediately when an unforeseen contingency strikes. That way you maintain momentum and you mitigate that guilt.
You maintain your agency by choosing to adapt. And finally, we looked at sustainability, embracing that long-term view of cumulative gains. We recognize that mastery requires us to endure the mundane repetition.
And actively counteract hedonic adaptation by reframing our routines as scaffolding that supports our growth, rather than as constraints that restrict us.
We sincerely hope this deep dive has equipped you not only with a robust psychological lexicon so you can understand the architecture of human behavior, but also with a more nuanced, self-compassionate, and strategic perspective on how you structure your daily life.
It's all about building a system that works with your deep human need for efficiency, for resilience, and for reward.
And remember, building a routine is an iterative process. Please do not expect the perfect, rigid routine on day one. Expect to be learning and methodically adjusting that scaffolding for the rest of your life.
The failure isn't missing the goal. The real failure is not having a plan for recovery.
So we leave you with this final provocative thought for you to apply. Fluency in any skill, whether it's language mastery or routine mastery, is a marathon, not a sprint.
So consider how your perspective shifts when you design your effort level for an entire year, focusing only on the sustainable rate instead of just for the next day or the next week.
Challenge yourself this week to identify one area where you are currently suffering from that all-or-nothing fallacy. Maybe it's your exercise, maybe it's your study time, and immediately define its scalable, minimum viable action.
That is the difference between a high-stakes goal that's destined to fail and a durable system that's built to last.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the psychology of enduring behavior.
Keep challenging your assumptions, and we will catch you on the next deep dive. Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we break down the most important sources to give you that intellectual edge.
The shortcut to being the most informed person in the room.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And today, our mission. It feels more critical than ever, really. We're launching a deep dive into overcoming what is, I think, the single most formidable adversary of modern life.
The crisis of attention.
The crisis of attention. It's a huge topic.
It is, and it goes so much deeper than just, a few productivity tips. The sources we've gathered are really focused on this concept they call the deep work philosophy.
Right.
And they frame it less as a technique and more of a survival strategy, really. It's a struction antidote to this constant feeling of being overloaded, of being connected all the time, which, let's face it, defines our work and our personal lives now.
It really does. And it gets to this core paradox of modern life, and I know you listening feel this. It's that sensation that you're just running faster and faster to stay in the same place. We have all these tools, AI, instant messaging, calendars that manage our lives for us, all designed to save us time. But the irony is, we feel more fragmented, more fundamentally exhausted than ever.
We do. We've become, masters of activity. We're great at being busy.
But not masters of achievement.
That's the disconnect right there. We've been conditioned, I think, to confuse the sheer volume of our actions with actual high-value output. We see busyness and we think productivity.
And it feels productive in the moment, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That frantic dance between the 20 open tabs, the constant email checking, the notifications, it gives you this shallow hit of feeling like you're working hard.
It does. It feels like you're on top of things. But then you get to the end of the day, you look back and you realize that very little of that high-effort, rapid-fire work actually contributed to something substantial.
Yeah.
It's all high mental effort being spent on really low-yield tasks.
And the source is really clear on this. This isn't just some personal failing. They frame it as an economic crisis. In our knowledge economy, the ability to create something complex, something that can't be easily replicated, that requires deep focus.
It's the only way.
So if everyone's attention is constantly scattered, the entire economy suffers from this collective drop in real intellectual output, which means the ability to do deep work, that's becoming the single most valuable currency you can have.
Precisely. You can't fix the output, the results, if you don't first fix the input.
Yeah.
And the input is your focus.
So here's the mission for you in this deep dive. We're going to pull out the specific strategies, the mindset shifts you need, and the essential vocabulary to even talk about what's happening to your brain. And more importantly, we're giving you the actual blueprint to move from that state of, frantic oscillation to one of focused, deep achievement.
Okay, so let's unpack this adversary. Let's really get to know it. To start, The sources introduce a concept that it hits so close to home, it's almost chillingly accurate. They call it continuous partial attention.
Continuous partial attention, CPA, it's the perfect term for this sort of stressful mode of existence that so many of us are in now.
What does it mean exactly?
It means we're in a state where we're never fully here with the task in front of us, but we're also never fully there responding to whatever else is demanding our attention. It's a perpetual state of scanning. Like a high alert, low intensity mental state.
Hedging your bets.
You're hedging your bets mentally. You're constantly looking at the horizon for the next email, the next ping, the next piece of information, ready to pivot at a moment's notice. But, and this is the critical part, you never ever commit your full cognitive horsepower to what you're doing right now.
That sounds absolutely exhausting just to describe.
It is. It's like you're always standing with one foot out the door, waiting for a fire drill that might never even happen.
And this state is fueled by our environment. The sources really hammer this home. Connectivity today is ubiquitous.
Meaning what exactly?
Meaning it's more than just available. It is present, it is appearing, it is found everywhere. It's inescapable. We're not just talking about Wi-Fi in the coffee shop anymore. We're talking about the expectation that you are accessible everywhere. On your wrist, in your car, at the dinner table.
The expectation, that's the real shift, isn't it?
Okay.
It's not the tech, it's the culture around the tech.
Absolutely. The problem isn't the smartphone itself. It's the unspoken social contract that now demands near instant accessibility. We've internalized that pressure to respond, to check in, to confirm you got the message. This digital environment, it's not just a layer on top of our lives anymore.
It's the atmosphere we breathe.
Exactly. It's an information-saturated atmosphere that requires constant, low-level monitoring just to stay afloat.
And the consequence of breathing this hyper-connected air, as the sources lay out, is something they call cognitive fragmentation. My mind feels like it's broken into 100 tiny disconnected pieces. I'm constantly dropping mental threads.
That's a perfect description of it. Cognitive fragmentation is what happens when your attention is interrupted so frequently, even for a few seconds, that the pieces of your focus left over are just too small.
Too small to do anything meaningful with.
Right. They're too small and too disconnected to allow for any real holistic understanding or complex problem solving. Imagine you're trying to build a 5,000-piece jigsaw puzzle.
Okay.
But every single time you find a piece and you're about to place it, someone taps you on the shoulder to show you a piece from a completely different puzzle. You can't hold the big picture in your head.
And that tap on the shoulder is the phone in our pocket. That's the relentless interrupter that ensures our time is broken into these, what did the sources call them? Ephemeral slivers.
Ephemeral. Lasting for a very short time. Fleeting moments that just vanish. We are literally thinking in 10-second chunks now.
Oh, that's grim.
It is. We are feeding the machine of distraction these tiny little bursts of our attention all day long. And the real consequence is that we spend most of our mental energy just managing the transition between tasks rather than actually focusing on the tasks themselves.
Which is why deep, sustained thought, the kind you need to really learn something new or master a skill, it becomes almost impossible.
Almost impossible.
This is where we have to get into the technical cost. Because when that notification pops up, you don't just lose the 30 seconds it takes to glance at it.
Yeah.
You pay a heavy tax. The sources call it the switching cost.
The switching cost is it's the economic core of this whole problem.
Yeah.
And the research on it is, well, it's sobering. There were studies done at the University of California, Irvine, that are just staggering.
What did they find?
They found that after a typical interruption, like an email notification, it took the average office worker an astonishing 23 minutes and 15 seconds to get back to the original task with the same level of focus they had before.
23 minutes.
23 minutes. That's the toll you pay for a 5-second glance at your inbox.
So if you're checking your email or your phone every 10 or 15 minutes, which I think a lot of us are,
you're essentially living in a state of perpetual recovery. Your brain never, ever fully re-engages with the primary task. It's always trying to get back to where it was.
and there's more to it than just the time, right? There's this other concept of attention residue.
Yes, exactly. Attention residue. Even when you consciously try to force yourself back to your main task, a part of your cognitive capacity, your brain power, remains stuck on the thing that interrupted you.
So you're still thinking about the email.
Subtly, yes. You're wondering what that person wanted, or you're worrying about the subject line, or you're already composing a reply in the back of your mind. It's like trying to cook a complex meal in the dining room while you've left a burner on low in the kitchen. You can't give your full attention.
And this drain, this constant paying of the switching cost and leaving behind attention residue is exactly why the sources label the harm as insidious.
It is the perfect word for it. An insidious process is one that proceeds gradually, very subtly, but with deeply harmful effects. It's so dangerous because you just don't notice the full extent of the damage until it's way too late.
You don't feel the cost of one single notification.
No.
Oh, yeah.
You just feel the accumulated damage at 5 p.m. when you look at your to-do list and realize you've accomplished nothing of substance, even though you feel completely fried.
Which brings us right back to that bizarre, exhausting paradox we started with. We are absolutely drained, mentally exhausted, but we haven't actually done any of the heavy intellectual lifting that leads to real achievement.
We're busy but not productive.
We've confused motion with progress.
Exactly. We're just running in place. The sources use this incredibly sharp analogy. We are drowning in the shallows rather than swimming in the deep.
Unpack that for us.
We're spending all our energy just flailing around in these minor, trivial, high-response tasks. Inbox triage, checking Slack, responding to low-stakes questions. We're in the shallow end of the pool, making a lot of splashes.
But we're not engaging with the deep end. The complex, difficult, high-value problems that actually move the needle, the ones that require concentrated, deep thought.
Right. And that fractured state, that constant splashing in the shallows, actively prevents you, the learner, from accumulating the very mastery you're seeking. You cannot learn a new coding language, or write a brilliant strategy document, or produce any original insight when your focus is being siphoned off every few minutes.
The resource is just too fragile.
It's a finite and fragile resource, the ability to hold complex ideas in your head simultaneously, and when it's perpetually being chipped away by these ubiquitous demands for your partial attention, you forfeit your ability to learn, to create, and to achieve.
So that's the diagnosis, that CPA and cognitive fragmentation are these insidious drains on our value, which sets the stage perfectly for the solution. So if the modern world is actively designed to sabotage our brains, we need a proactive, deliberate strategy to fight back and rebuild that capacity. Let's move to the cure. Okay, so if cognitive fragmentation is this insidious disease, then deep work is the powerful medicine. It's the core concept that promises to restore our mental resources and our ability to produce high-value work. So let's start with the basics. How do the sources actually define deep work?
Operationally, deep work is defined as the ability to focus without distraction on a cognitively demanding task.
Without distraction, that's the key part.
That's the non-negotiable part. It's a deliberate, intense state of concentration. The goal isn't just to put in the hours, it's to push your cognitive capabilities to their absolute limit. It's intentional, high-intensity mental labor applied strategically to a very specific and challenging goal.
It sounds hard. I mean, if it were easy, everyone would already be doing it.
Exactly. And its difficulty is precisely what makes it so valuable in the marketplace today. The sources characterize deep work as the antithesis, the direct opposite of all the superficial stuff that dominates our digital lives.
So if the default is a quick scroll, a shallow skim,
and an immediate, low-effort reply, then deep work is total, structured, committed immersion. It's built on the recognition that in today's economy, your value is tied directly to the quality of your focus, not just the quantity of hours you're logged in.
when I read about this kind of intense, all-in focus, my mind immediately goes to that psychological state of flow.
Yeah.
That perfect state where the challenge of what you're doing perfectly matches your skill level and the rest of the world just seems to melt away.
Flow is the ultimate reward for successfully engaging in deep work. It's what happens when you manage to shut out all the distractions and the task is just hard enough to completely absorb you. You enter this optimal state of consciousness.
And something happens in the brain, right?
Yeah, neurologically, it's often associated with something called transient hypofrontality. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it just means parts of your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for your inner critic, for self-monitoring, temporarily power down.
So you stop judging yourself.
You stop judging yourself, you stop worrying about what other people are thinking, you stop thinking about your to-do list, and you just do the work. You become one with the task.
Which explains why time gets so weird in that state. One of those fascinating things about flow is how it seems to warp our perception of time. The sources say that time appears to dilate.
To dilate, to expand, to become larger. The density of your output during a flow state is so incredibly high that your brain can't accurately track the passage of time.
Right.
You might come out of a 3-hour deep work session feeling like maybe an hour has passed. Not because you were zoned out, but because the amount of meaningful work you produced was so dense and continuous. You might write half a chapter of a book or solve a complex problem in what subjectively feels like an instant.
But the sources are clear. You don't just stumble into this state. It's not an accident.
Never. It requires deliberate structural barriers against all that ubiquitous noise we talk about.
And this brings us to what is maybe the most brutal prescription from the sources. They say you must ruthlessly eliminate distractions. And that word ruthlessly, it really stands out. It's not about being polite. It's self-defense.
It's absolute war on distraction. You have to understand that the digital world is engineered by thousands of the smartest people in the world to pull your attention back. And if you leave any weakness, any door open, even a tiny crack, they will exploit it.
So ruthless elimination means what in practice?
It means a zero-tolerance policy for distraction during your scheduled deep work time. It means treating interruptions not as minor annoyances, but as direct threats to your livelihood. Because in the knowledge economy, that's exactly what they are.
To enforce this, the sources get very practical. They talk about a necessary practice called time blocking, and they offer a few different ways to do it.
Time blocking is the architecture. It's the strategic framework for your deep work. It means you look at your day, your week, and you proactively assign your most important high-value tasks to specific blocks of time. And then you treat those appointments as if they're with the most important client in the world.
And that client is you.
That client is your brain. And the sources actually lay out 4 different philosophies for this, which is really useful because not everyone's life or job is the same.
Okay, let's break those down. What are the 4 approaches?
So first, you have the monastic philosophy. This is the most extreme. You basically structure your life to radically minimize or just eliminate shallow obligations altogether.
Like a monk.
Exactly. Think of the writer who goes to a cabin in the woods for 3 months to finish a book with no internet. It's total, prolonged sequestration. It's incredibly effective, but let's be honest, it's not practical for most people.
Right. That's a luxury most of us juggling jobs and families just don't have. What's the next one?
The bimodal philosophy. This one is a lot more practical for more people. You clearly divide your time. So for a few consecutive days, you go full monastic, total isolation, deep work only. And then the rest of the week or month, you're back in shallow mode, answering emails, going to meetings, being connected.
So you're not trying to do deep and shallow work at the same time, which we already know is impossible because of the switching cost. You're compartmentalizing them.
You're compartmentalizing them aggressively. Then you have the rhythmic philosophy. This is probably the most common and for many the easiest to get started with.
How does that work?
The goal here is to create a rhythm, a daily habit. You schedule a deep work session at the same time every single day. Maybe it's 90 minutes from 6 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. before anyone else is awake. You rely on ritual and repetition to build the habit so it becomes automatic.
I can see how that would help. It reduces the mental energy you have to spend just deciding when to do the deep work.
It makes the decision once, and then you just execute the habit. And finally, there's the journalistic philosophy. This one is for people whose schedules are genuinely unpredictable. Executives, journalists, people in crisis response.
Right. They can't block out 9 to 11 every morning.
Exactly. So what they do is they train themselves to seize moments of opportunity as they appear. A flight gets delayed. That's an hour of deep work. A meeting gets canceled. They immediately sequester themselves in an empty office for 45 minutes and get to it.
Sequester. That's the verb that underpins all of these philosophies, isn't it? To sequester yourself is to isolate or hide away. It's a deliberate physical separation from all the external noise.
It is. Whether it's 3 months in a cabin or 30 minutes in a quiet conference room with the door shut, the physical act of isolation is essential. It sends this powerful, unmistakable signal to your brain that says, this time is sacred. The outside world does not exist for the next hour.
You're creating friction against distraction.
You are creating a temporary vacuum where that ubiquitous connectivity is forcefully broken.
But let's be real about the psychological hurdle here, because this is where I think most people fall down. You sit down, you turn everything off, the silence descends, and it is deeply uncomfortable.
It feels like withdrawal.
Oh, it absolutely does. And we have to normalize that feeling. For years, we've conditioned our brains to crave that little dopamine hit from a new notification, that jolt of novelty. We are, in a very real sense, addicted to being connected.
So when you first try this, the silence creates anxiety.
It does. A fear of missing out. A nagging feeling that something important might be happening and you don't know about it.
We have basically trained ourselves to be terrified of boredom. We use every empty space in our lives, waiting for the coffee to brew, walking to the car, not for reflection, but as an opportunity to pull out the phone and consume something.
The moment stillness appears, we grab the device to fill the void.
And that habit, that is the conditioning we have to aggressively break. The sources say that the discomfort you feel in those first few minutes of a deep work session isn't a sign you should stop. It's proof that the conditioning is starting to break down. You're forcing your mind to relearn how to just be with itself.
It sounds painful, but there's a huge counterintuitive benefit here. The payoff. It's in that stillness, not the digital noise, that real creativity gestates.
The development of an idea over a long period. We think of creativity as a lightning strike, a sudden spark, but the sources frame it as a much slower process. Incubation.
You can't rush it.
You cannot rush profound insight. If you are constantly filling every quiet moment, every bit of mental slack with shallow input from social media or the news, you are denying your subconscious mind the space and time it needs to connect disparate ideas and produce something truly original. Deep work creates the time for that creative gestation to happen.
So the conclusion here is that we are constantly making this terrible trade. We are trading genuine intellectual insight, which is lasting and valuable, for mere entertainment. Trivial inputs that are completely fleeting.
It's a trade we make 100 times a day. We swap a difficult long-term reward for an easy, immediate hit of novelty. And so reclaiming your focus, it demands more than just time management. It demands a deep commitment to being comfortable with solitude.
You have to be willing to be a little bored.
You have to be willing to be uncomfortable in the short term to achieve true depth in the long term. And that shift, it requires more than just a deep work schedule. It needs a whole lifestyle adjustment. And that's where digital minimalism comes in.
Okay, so this is where the rubber meets the road. We're moving from the theory into the practical day-to-day application. If deep work is the high-intensity workout,
The dedicated training session.
digital minimalism is the year-round diet and lifestyle that makes that workout possible. It gets you mentally fit. But first, let's clear up a huge misunderstanding. Digital minimalism does not mean we have to become Luddites.
That is such a crucial clarification. A Luddite, historically, was someone opposed to new technology. The goal here is absolutely not to smash your computer or reject the internet. Technology is an incredibly powerful tool when it's used correctly.
The problem isn't the tool.
The problem is our unconscious, reactive use of the tool, the way it has come to dominate our lives without our explicit permission.
Okay, so this is not about total abstinence.
No, abstinence means giving it up completely. Digital minimalism isn't about quitting the internet cold turkey. It's about management. It's about setting boundaries. It's about evaluation.
What do we evaluate?
You're evaluating the trade-off. You're forced to recognize that most of the digital tools we use offer a very minor fractional benefit, but they come at the massive cost of our cognitive focus. And it forces you to consciously decide which trade-offs you're willing to make and which ones you're not.
So the core philosophy then has to be management through intentionality. We have to shift from just reacting to proactively choosing.
Intentionality. That is the entire game. The fact of being deliberate, of doing things on purpose. It's a massive philosophical pivot. Instead of grabbing your phone because it buzzed or scrolling social media because you have a moment of boredom, you only use a piece of technology because you have a specific, defined, high-value purpose for it in that moment.
And you have to weigh every action.
You weigh every action against 3 concerns. 1, does this tool clearly help me achieve a goal that I deeply value? 2, is this the absolute best way to achieve that goal? And 3, the most important one, what is the cost of using this tool to my attention?
This requires a huge shift in our role. We have to stop being these passive consumers just, drinking from whatever fire hose the algorithm points at us.
Right.
And we have to become an active curator of our own attention.
The role of the curator is the perfect metaphor for applying this intentionality. A museum curator doesn't just accept every painting that shows up at the door. They're incredibly selective. They choose only the most valuable, high-quality pieces that serve the collection's core mission.
And we need to do that with our digital lives.
You have to apply that same aggressive discernment. You must ruthlessly filter what gets to demand your focus and what gets rejected at the door.
So let's get into the specifics. What are the practical tactics the sources mention for actually becoming this curator? Let's start with the physical environment.
Curating your environment is about taking physical control of the spaces that tempt you. It can be a few really simple but profound actions. For example, create friction.
What do you mean by friction?
Make it harder to get distracted. Permanently set your phone to grayscale. It instantly makes it less visually appealing. It reduces that dopamine reward. Move your phone charger out of the bedroom, creating a hard boundary between work and rest. Use a physical notebook to jot down quick thoughts instead of an app that's designed to pull you in deeper. You're literally designing your environment to favor depth over distraction.
That makes so much sense. You're trying to win the battle before the notification even has a chance to arrive. And speaking of notifications, the second tactic is a big one. Turning off all non-essential notifications.
This is completely non-negotiable for a digital minimalist. You have to understand, most notifications are not urgent for you. They are urgent for the app developer who wants to increase their engagement metrics.
They need to be eliminated.
Ruthlessly. You have to create a clear hierarchy. Tier 1 notifications are genuine, time-sensitive emergencies relevant to your core work and life. That list should be incredibly short. A call from your kid's school maybe, everything else, the news alerts, the social media updates, the friendly reminders, all of it needs to be silenced. Permanently.
By doing that, you're immediately reducing that ubiquitous pressure on your attention. You're minimizing that switching cost we talked about.
You're reclaiming those 23 minutes of recovery time dozens of times a day. And this brings us to social media. The sources say we have to treat it not as an entertainment slot machine to be played out of boredom, but as a specific tool with a specific purpose.
The slot machine analogy is perfect. It really gets at the variable reward schedule that makes it so addictive.
It is. You keep pulling the lever, you keep scrolling, because you never know if the next one will be a really interesting article, a message from a friend, or just another cat video. That unpredictability is the addiction loop.
So what's the minimalist approach?
The minimalist says, I will only open this app if it serves a specific, predefined purpose. If I need to promote my business or check in on a specific community group, I will schedule a 15-minute block to do that specific thing. And once that purpose is fulfilled, the app is closed. No aimless scrolling. That's the definition of a lack of intentionality.
And the sources give a really powerful way to implement all of this, the 30-day digital detox.
Yes, this is the practical proving ground. The challenge is simple, but not easy. For 30 days, you stop using all optional technologies. Social media, news feeds, anything that isn't absolutely essential for your work or life.
And after the 30 days?
After the 30 days are up, you slowly and deliberately reintroduce technologies, but only if they pass that strict intentionality test we talked about. If a tool doesn't survive the detox, it's basically proven that its cost to your attention far outweighs whatever minimal value it was providing. It forces you to discover the core set of tools that genuinely make your life better and discard all the noise.
This kind of discipline, it sounds exhausting at first, but the sources are clear that the return on investment, the ROI, is massive.
The ROI is cognitive clarity. It's a sense of calm that is otherwise unattainable in the modern world. When you're constantly swimming in the shallows of continuous partial attention, your baseline state is stress. You're reactive.
Right.
By regaining control of your focus, by proactively designing what gets your attention, you regain control of your own mental landscape. You stop feeling like you're just responding to a schedule created by other people's demands, and you start designing your own days. You start choosing where your precious cognitive energy gets spent.
And ultimately, the final powerful implication from all this ties everything back to the quality of your life. The sources say the quality of your life is determined by what you choose to pay attention to.
It's as simple and as profound as that. If your attention is scattered across 100 low-value pings a day, your life feels scattered, chaotic, reactive. You're always playing catch-up.
But if your attention is focused,
if your attention is fiercely guarded, and you are deliberately investing your finite cognitive resources into your most meaningful work, your deepest learning, and your most important relationships, your life feels meaningful. It feels purposeful, stable. Focused attention is the bedrock of a life well lived. It is the single highest leverage thing you can work on, professionally and personally. Hashtag tag outro. So let's just synthesize what we've unpacked in this deep dive. We started by really diagnosing the modern disease. Continuous partial attention. It's driven by the ubiquitous and insidious nature of our digital world, and it leads directly to that crippling cognitive fragmentation and costly attention residue.
And the cure, the core strategy for creating real value in this noisy world, is deep work. It is the antithesis of all that shallow skimming. And it demands real structural changes like adopting a rhythmic time blocking philosophy and having the courage to actually sequester your time and face that initial discomfort of stillness so that true insight can finally gestate.
And the path to sustaining that deep work habit is digital minimalism. It's a philosophy that's all about intentionality. It's not about becoming a Luddite or practicing total abstinence. It's about that crucial role shift from being a passive consumer to an active curator of your own focus, guarding it fiercely from all those ephemeral, distracting demands.
And this is a continuous practice. It's not a one-time fix. The world is always going to be trying to pull your attention away. But every time you build these deliberate barriers, you're strengthening your mind's ability to sustain effort. The path to mastery is continuous. You have to keep practicing the art of focus, keep solidifying those habits of stillness, and keep sharpening the intention behind every single tool you choose to use.
We really encourage you to start small. Don't try to go full monastic tomorrow, but maybe try a 60-minute rhythmic deep work block. Put it in your calendar, turn everything off, and just tolerate that initial discomfort. See what happens.
And here is the final provocative thought we want to leave you with. In an era where fragmentation is the default setting for almost everyone, where we're all constantly being pinged for our partial attention, the ability to successfully sequester your time and maintain deep, unbroken focus is not just a productivity hack. It is, empirically, the rarest and therefore the most valuable commodity in the knowledge economy.
Knowing that this single ability directly translates into economic and personal success, ask yourself this. What specific non-essential notification will you eliminate from your life today, right now, to reclaim just one small sliver of that intentional focus and invest it back into what truly matters to you?